very much focused for product managers as yourself, minimizing risky product innovation through feature and experimentation. So I will explain all the big words later on. What is feature management, what is experimentation, personalization, and how that can be done to reduce risk of your product, mainly digital products. So apps, IoT products, sometimes people do set-up boxes. You need to test the user experience of those. We do support that type of products as well, okay? So a bit about myself, if you go to LinkedIn, I'm happy to actually link up with everyone. My name is Ailean. I'm based in Singapore, so I head the partnership ecosystem for AB Tasty in APJ region. So other than working with solution provider and digital agency partners to roll out AB Tasty solution, I work with a lot of technology partners to expand the ecosystem of AB testing to analytics tool, for example, mixed panel, segments, Telium. These are other partners that we work with. We do work with insight tools, session recording, heat maps recording to actually understand the issues that your website or your app face, and based on that, actually do more experiments, okay? So I've been in software industry more than 15 years, but specifically in software as a service, for about 10 years, starting with NetSuite, Oracle, Salesforce, and others, okay? So in this SaaS industry especially, everyone is very fast-paced. The product releases is looking at least like every month there's a new release. People are expecting more and more new features that's coming in. I'm sure as product managers yourself, you will actually experience this problem as well. So today's topic is really on product innovation. Some of the common challenges that in the market that you all face. Introducing Flagship, which is a platform that has some solutions around it and some best practices around it. And lastly, I'll go through some use cases or case studies that can be interesting with some comparison and visual for you to think about as well, okay? So innovation is really the ability to see changes as an opportunity, not a threat. And this comes from Steve Jobs. Naturally, he's one of the biggest innovators in our century. So how do we look at innovation as an opportunity, but not scared of it and take it on to actually improve the product itself? Okay, so why product innovation? Naturally, we want to innovate our product to stay relevant to the market, to guarantee a more long-term growth of your product itself. And some of the challenges is ideation. So where do I generate ideas to improve the product? Some can come from your feedback from your clients. But as you grow, there's always roadblocks that actually becomes an issue. And how fast can you actually evolve based on the feedback from your clients itself? Market viability. You analyze your product's market viability before you do the development itself. So this is a process of how you evaluate risk. How much of input are you taking from your customers that would not affect your speed to actually develop new features? And then before you test it out before you actually develop into your product and release to the market. Okay, so due to the slow pace of review or feedback cycles, this may actually make your product not innovative enough. You may have competitors coming up with new product quicker than you. Okay, so time to market. Every product managers have the stress of meeting deadlines, right? So this is one of the other challenge. And what is the key metrics that you need to meet? What are the business KPIs that needs to be met to actually innovate your product itself? Okay, so these are some very common questions and challenges that you face daily. And this session will be talking about how to balance that input from your customers, at the same time on speed to actually innovate and to actually test your product thoroughly before you release into the market. Okay, so people and product-led growth makes a big difference. As product manager, there's three main components of people you work with that will help you in this process. First, yourself as a product manager, you want to delight your customers based on the feedback, but you also need to control risk. Then you have the developers that is trying to ship faster, but then they also need to control the codes, how they produce the codes and how fast they can actually do the coding and produce their codes. And then you have DevOps, development operations part, that actually controls the deployment of the code itself. To scale higher, it's all about where you deploy your codes, whether it's a SaaS solution or on-premise solution. This is a very important part of developing and actually making your product public as well. Okay, so these three persons really need to work together before you actually can come out with an innovative product and control the risk of it, right? So the main challenge is to deliver faster, to experience more efficiency. You can see this curve is well known that if there's late entry into the market, not only that it reduces the peak of your product itself or the peak of this innovation itself, that will definitely mean that it will reduce your profit or your revenue that is gained from this feature. So this is a big gap, okay? The late entry into the market not only give a competitor a competitive advantage against you, but sometimes if you're too late now into the market on this new feature, it doesn't even hit the peak of this feature at all. So totally, that feature may be redundant after 1 year or a couple of months of releasing that feature itself. Okay. So a fully optimized product management process could increase a company's profit up to 34.2%. So optimizing your product management is the key to actually reduce your risk on new features. Okay, so it's indicated and shown by this survey where it increases the profit by over 30% itself. Okay. Successful companies, you can see all the successful companies here actually optimize this period experience based on a skill, right? The important part that they apply is really on this 1,000 experimentation rule. So you can see in this graph, the number of experiments actually grow exponentially against the success of the company. Okay, the more experiments you do, the more guaranteed success the company or the digital product is actually produced. This is shown in big names like this, at least 1,000 experiments per year. Okay. And this, if you actually Google, there is this regulation of 1,000 experiment rule. So there's an interesting concept around it as well. Okay, so to be like a tech company, it requires to accelerate time to market while controlling risk. So what is mentioned here give you a solid understanding that definitely you need to speed up the time to market, but you also need to control the risk of your new feature itself. Okay. This slide actually shows you that the optimization of your product is not a one-time thing, okay? Whether you are doing an experiment or a feature management or an innovation, is a continuous process of challenging this idea to keep it aligning to market and customers' experience. So as you see in this graph here, really, tests can be tested and the winning test will then give you an idea of moving that into personalization. You personalize that feature according to a certain target audience or a certain segment itself. At the same time, a test idea, when it fails, gives you more ideas to test, okay? It can be continuously going back from test to personalization, and then personalization back to test, okay? This transformation needs to be continuous. It needs to be in a culture within your team, and the bigger, broader marketing or product team to continuously challenge the idea and continuously gather feedback from clients to optimize this process itself. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay.
Gimana? Ada yang nanya? I think all good for now.
All right, good. So continue on this. You can see that there is three main parts here. One is tests, different type of A/B testing, multivariance tests. And then there is personalization and patches, right? Personalization means that you have an idea of the target audience that you want to show a certain journey, customer journey. Personalization can be showing an apple to the segment that is a woman, or showing orange to a segment that is considered for men, okay? That's personalization. Patches refers to giving the same experience for 100% of your traffic itself, right? So after you did a test and this test shows it as a successful test, that's where you change or convert that test into a patch to be running for 100% of your traffic. A patch can be just running on top of your website, on top of your app, but also you can decide to take that back to development or your product team to develop into hard coded as a feature to be released, okay? So then these patches can be released to all your audience before you actually decide to do new features itself, right? Okay.
Okay, Aileen, we actually have a question here. Silakan, yep. Mas Taufik.
Hello, Aileen. I have a question. So basically, in the previous, in this slide, we mentioned about the winning test. So actually, I'm quite wondering, like, how you define the winning test itself. Do we have like some kind of metrics that we need to assess? And then if we reach this kind of metrics or the outcome, it's gonna be the winning test. That is the first questions. Maybe after that, I'm gonna go with the follow-up question.
Okay, so it's really on what is your business KPI itself to actually decide the winning test itself. If you are in e-commerce business, naturally your winning variance would be either for them to click on a CTA or whether to actually end up with them purchasing or buying more. That becomes your winning variance itself, right? If you are testing new features, your winning variance is definitely when that features are being used by your client or visitors. So you will have to define what's your main KPI that you're testing against.
I see. I think the second questions, actually, it is based on my experience. I have run the A/B test before through some kind of tool named Firebase. And I find that the data or the parameter that I have been set is not, the data is not tally. It's not tally, like, I'm quite wondering, like, why it's not, it's not based on the hypothesis that we commonly found in the real life. Like, there is differences, and then also, like, we did on like multiple devices like iOS and also Android, but I'm quite wondering like why the result between iOS and also the Android is different from one to another. Like, would you mind to explain maybe your experience about making like the A/B test on those mobile app like Android and iOS? And do you have any experience finding the different result, or maybe like the data there is not quite tally and really different with your hypothesis?
Okay, understand. So I think there is a couple of questions here. Firstly, for Firebase itself, it's not, their main feature is not into experiments. Okay, Firebase solution is a very much a feature management software. So feature management would be that you tag a specific features or elements on your app, then you actually decide to roll it out and see how many of your clients see this element and actually react to this element itself. It's not a full testing tool where it actually gives you a consolidated report of actual uplift against your KPI itself, right? So it actually ends up to talking about the platform itself. A good experimentation or A/B test platform should allows you to have multiple goals, okay? It's not only against your CTA of clicking a certain button, but also end up on your secondary and third goals of like add to cart or transactions itself, okay? So that's one of the criteria you should look at. Secondly, the reporting of that tool or platform itself, how in-depth that reporting goes into showing your statistics of each of this experiment itself. Okay, so that will actually help you to decide what's a very good experimentation tool. Regarding use cases, I actually have a few use cases later on that actually will address your issue for Android and for other interfaces. Okay, so I'll actually discuss that later on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so here is really to emphasize that your mentality of your team needs to be continually testing new ideas, because not only a visitor that comes to your website or your app changes as they go along. So me, for example, comes to the website as a visitor, but after looking at some of your products, started buying one product, right? So I'm actually a tester to use your product. Then how you actually interface the experience with me will differ when the second time I come back to buy a product because I bought something before, right? Gradually, this will change as well as I come back more regularly and become a supporter or advocate of your product itself. So you have to have this mentality of continuously updating your test or personalization against different audience. As me as a visitor have also changed over the time itself, right? Okay, so really what you're looking for is a platform that accelerates the continuous delivery of product decision with fast, reliable, data-driven feature management and product optimization itself. So fast is good, but it also needs to be reliable and proven with data. So in the example that was brought up by the question just now, it was that the data wasn't reliable enough. Your experiment wasn't giving you good reports to make a decision. So that's an issue when you have this type of platform. The platform needs to come out with very clear reports for you to understand what's the uplift and what's the confidence level of applying one of these tests to your product, right? Okay. All-in-one feature management solution should include things like that. First, it's really allow you to actually categorize the different persona of visitor that comes to your website or your app, basically. So it will have segmentation They will have a certain data point that be able to gather the browsing behavior, the purchasing behavior of the visitor itself. Okay. Next, it allows you to do things like progressive rollout. So progressive rollout goes into the feature of feature management. That means you are releasing new features into your app, and you want to progressively test the market of users that is actually seeing this new feature. So rather than risking your 100% of your traffic, you would progressively roll out to 10% of traffic. And if it hits your KPI, you roll out to more of it, right? Feature flagging means that it allows you to tag and flag all the elements within your app or your website itself, okay? Then you do testing and personalization, and then auto-optimization. So that means all the data you come back from this experimentation easily allows you to change that into personalization or patches to then improve your website itself. Okay, so this should be all the features that you find in all-in-one platform that actually helps you with experimentation and feature management. Okay, so introducing Flagship. Flagship is one of our server-side testing platform by A/B Tasty. Okay, it's server-side testing because it's rendered through a REST API call from the server itself, right? So I'll explain more some of the features. So the main feature, yes, we do A/B testing on features, personalization, one-to-one personalization of the segment itself. We do feature control. That means you can flag out the new features and gradually roll out to only a certain type of clients or a certain type of elements. Risk-free releases. So risk-free releases allows you to gradually roll out to your others, at the same time roll back that new feature if it doesn't hit the KPI that you want to achieve. Okay, so in any release, there is always a chance that things will go wrong, right? How do you control that risk itself? Okay, so this is where you would tag the features and stop that new feature when it doesn't hit your KPI. An easy example would be something like you are rolling out a new payment method to your app, right? So gradually you roll out this new payment method to 20% of your traffic now. And then if it actually hits 80% of success rate, then you will roll it out to 50% of the traffic next week, right? But if it doesn't hit 80% of a success transaction rate on this new payment method, immediately it will switch off this new payment method and roll back to the old features. So your app still works. It doesn't affect people buying from the old payment methods. So then it shuts down the new payment method, and then your team can immediately look into this issue and then re-release this new feature itself. So this is what we call risk-free releases. Any questions? Okay, if no questions, I'll just go through a little bit more on the product itself. So firstly, is on the feature control. So it actually have a button where you actually allows you to just flip on and off a certain flag on your feature itself. I think this part I have explained a little bit. Gradually, you are rolling out into different phases of your new audience. And then you do a risk-free release based on the rollback of your KPI itself, right? We also allow for dynamic traffic allocation. So in an experiment process, you have different variants, right? Your test would then have, for example, one base original, 3 variants, variants A, B, and C. In your testing period of 2 weeks, gradually you will see that after 2 or 3 days, your variant C is actually achieving better uplift against your KPI itself. So with this dynamic traffic allocation, the system will then allocate more and more traffic to variant C during this experimentation period. And by the end of this 2-week experiment, 100% of your traffic is already allocated to the winning variants, which means that during this 2 weeks period, you do not lose any of your revenue because you are testing. So this is one of the features where you can use that to allocate quickly traffic into a winning variance for you. Okay. In flagship, it actually allows you to easily implement the flagship within your code itself. So this flagship API is a decision API. So it's a bunch of risk codes that we give you to actually include into the app. Okay. It can be your app, it can be an IoT product or connected as a smart TV product itself, right? So based on that, we can then start doing flagging or feature management itself. Okay. So this decision API allows you then to integrate into any of your language of your that is running on your app. At the same time, we also provide support for over 11 different types of SDKs. So we do have SDK for Android or iOS phones as well. Okay. And this decision API sits into our SaaS solution backend, which is on the Amazon API gateway, and which is distributed globally into all their centers globally. So allowing you to roll out your app globally into any region itself. Okay. So I mentioned we have 11 different types of SDKs according to languages. So you can see the Androids and all the React Native and other type of languages have SDK to support them as well. Okay. Some of the use cases for your flag are this: feature release flags. So continuously support deployment of new features into your product itself. That means any elements on your app, you can flag that. So you will have your developer create a flag on this button, for example, or on this basket page, okay? And after that flag is created, your project manager can easily just toggle on this flag and then create the campaign for him to actually test out this flag, okay? So your feature flags allocates visitor who will have a different experience based on the different flags that is actually enabled, okay? Your feature flag can be a personalization flag as well. So you create a certain segment for a certain persona of your visitor, and each of these persona will see different things. It can be an operation flag. That means it controls the operational goals that you want to achieve itself. For example, in my payment example, I'm actually flagging the success rate of this new payment method. So it's based on whether the payment goes through or not. That flag is considered an operation flag. Okay, you can be a permission flag. So that means that certain compliance that you are actually, for example, if you work for a bank, then you will have a certain compliance, right? So there will be a permission flag where sometimes you will have push notification to the app itself. And based on that, if the permission is granted for this transaction, there's a permission flag that can be used. Okay. And then lastly is on the progressive deployment of your feature into the different allocation of traffic itself. So these are some of the use cases that can be used to flag your elements and test them before you go hard and release all your new features to your app itself. Okay. The flagship dashboard gives you an overview of all your projects into one place. So all the different flags that is created by your developer is in one place. Okay, so then it allows you to toggle on and off this new flag itself. So if this flag is already created by your developer, the project manager don't really need to know programming language. It's really a project manager to enable different flags that is used to be in the experiment or in the personalization itself, right? Okay. It also allows you to ensure that your features are deployed, bring value to your users itself. So here is where you create the different KPIs and track your goals of your KPI itself, right? So you can see that in this experiment, you have the original and your variation 1, and the flag is whether they are clicking on the purchase button or are they clicking on the try it now button. So that becomes your experiment on which one will be more attractive to the visitor, right? Don't be afraid to personalize, okay? So while you are driving the conversions of people buying itself, it's also important to do personalization. That means you treat different users on a different experience, right? So in this case, you can see that the experience for a VIP user would be very different from a normal or a casual visitor to the site of the app itself. Okay, so you can then create flags to actually allows you to personalize based on these different personas that comes in. Okay, avoid the big bang rollout itself. While we are very confident sometimes to release new features into the app, it's a good practice not to release to 100% of traffic immediately. You can see here the deployment step. You can schedule it every day, a different amount or percentage of your traffic will see this. Okay, so you can see that on 10th of February is 15%, on 11th of February is 30%. So gradually you expose this new feature to 100% of traffic by the 16th of February itself. So this is also an assurance and risk control practice. Okay. Here you can see in this deployment of July 10 to August 15, the different percentage that he indicated. And then below, it actually defined the rollback feature as well. So we have this rollback feature where you can actually define what's the rollback, okay? Automatically rollback if your main KPI does not achieve that threshold that you are monitoring itself. Okay, we also provide different environments for you, multiple environments to test. So it's again a good practice to actually test your feature on pre-production before you actually copy and push it out to production itself. So you can test it on your local environment, your local server. You can do a staging server. You can do pre-production and as well as production. So different environment is really just copy and paste the same flag and codes that is created. Then you can test it out into different region, for example, before you send it out to your production. Okay. So all these new use cases are given in our product itself. I mean, our platform gives you the new use cases. So we had talked about A/B tests, feature toggling, personalization, and progressive rollout itself, right? So just with a few minutes, these campaigns can be created by the project manager itself. And we also give you the templates of different library of use cases itself. So this are some ideas for people to actually create their experiments. So next is about reporting, the importance of a good report. Here you can see that report should be based on Bayesian statistics. Bayesian statistics means that it can give you a decision confidence level, okay? So if you look at the chart, it may be a little bit small, but you can see that on the variation 1 here, well, it gives you the percentage on transaction rate and uplift itself. It actually gives you something called percentage of chance to win or confidence level, okay? What it means here is that you have your original version, you have your variance 1 that give you an uplift of around 1%. But at the same time, if you implement variance 1, okay, 84% of the chances it will be better than your original version itself. Okay, so that's the definition of your chances to win or confidence level. Okay, so for experimentation platforms, usually you will have this type of report that goes into very detail of the results of your experiment. Okay. Lastly, A/B Tasty flagship is built for enterprise solution. So our data center, data infrastructure is based on Google and AWS standard itself, right? So that will give you a high performance as well as an SLA of 99.95% at least, okay? Solid governance where you have pre-pod and pod environment to test out your new features, and compliance, so that we have all the compliance against the different standards as well. Right, so any questions up to there?
Oke, silakan teman-teman bagi ada yang mau bertanya. That was a lot of information.
Yeah, so it actually gives you an idea on enterprise environment when you are actually doing different tests as well as controlling different features itself. And these are some of the criteria or best practice that needs to be done.
Okay, we have one question from Daisy, but it's quite general. Would you like to answer now or at the end, Aileen?
Maybe can you read the questions to me?
Have you ever faced failure when doing product experimentation? If you did, what did you do? And did you and your team close the product or did anything else?
Okay, that's a good question. I think based on our experience with our clients, there's always chances of failure in an experiment, right? Your team may come up with an idea to test a certain criteria, right? For example, just a simple example, right? On the product page itself, you may be showing the photo of a hotel room, okay? And then you will be testing whether that photo is actually will increase a better conversion rate against a photo of the hotel lobby or the whole hotel environment itself. So this is a test where no one knows what's your client likes, right? Whether it's the room or their focus is on the hotel environment itself, right? So if you do this test, it will give you an idea of what the client like better. It doesn't say that whether it's a winning variance or a losing variance. It doesn't mean that the photo at this page of the hotel room, while it actually generates more clicks or more purchases, is the best solution for you. But at least you got to know that at this page, this is the best, what people like to see in this page itself, right? So if there's a field experiment, you should use that as a learning for you to improve your test and do more tests after that itself. So if the test says that the original version is better, your variance 1 is not an uplift, but a negative number, right? So it then asks you to do more experiment. You can do more experiment into that negative number. Why is it a negative number? If I change a certain parameters of that experiment, does that then give me a better conversion rate or not? So it should becomes a test ground for you to generate more ideas yourself. And don't take it as an failure and then stop testing, because that doesn't help in improving your customer journey.
Okay, hope that answers. Maybe we can go next, Aileen.
Okay, sure. So while all these are good, a lot of ideas come from the data you already collected. Okay, so data can be collected on analytics tool, right? So analytics tool is not just collecting data from your website and your app. It collects data from your historical data, from your brick and mortar shop, from other touch points itself. So while it's good that an experiment tool can gather a certain amount of data, but there are use cases that can't be addressed with either just an analytic tool or just an A/B testing tool. For example, after you do an A/B test itself, you cannot analyze the post-experiment data itself. This is where we then send out this data to analytics tool to then further analyze those data. Okay, behavior engagement, for example, there's abandoned cart multiple times, but for A/B testing itself, we can detect one abandoned cart because it's real time. The cache information is still there. You can target that cart, right? If the person leaves during that session, but we cannot analyze multiple sessions. After they leave, what's the next follow-up itself? This is where analytics tool comes in, and then we push this data to, for example, Mixpanel, and they can then combine the data based on the IP address. If they register an email address, they can combine those data, or they can combine it based on the device ID itself. All right. For focus targeting, follow your user across the different funnel, okay? Whether across your website, then they go into their app itself, and then they came back to the website. This is something an experimentation platform cannot do because we are only based on the real-time one session, right? This is where analytics tool then comes in, right? So to address this type of different scenarios, you need to have a direct integration with an analytics tool, and we work very closely with Mixpanel. I'm not sure how many people here actually use an analytics tool like Mixpanel, Amplitude, Segment, or just Google Analytics, for example. So A/B testing do integrate directly with Mixpanel. So integration would be something like this, where we export all our experiment events to Mixpanel. Mixpanel that analyze the behavior into more detail. It can combine with other sessions, other data from other websites, or even from their loyalty program, for example. And then they create the cohort in the Mixpanel analytics itself. And we import that cohort back into our segment builder, right? So in our segment builder, we can directly point or target the cohort that is coming from Mixpanel and create the segment where we then go into a next experiment and personalization itself. So this is a round loop or closed loop of data flow, two-way data flow with Mixpanel. And we can do that with GA4, for example, or segment and others as well, right? So this will allow you to do more in-depth analysis of your data, at the same time, more in-depth experiment of those data itself. All right, any questions? Okay, if no questions, I'll just go into some case studies. I think someone asked about some case studies. So this is a case study of a fashion group that is trying to test out whether on their product page, specifically for mobile environment, right? So for mobile environment, it's a small phone, right? You are seeing small things. Whether it's better to reduce the friction of purchase in this environment, which means to add the buy now button. The original version is just to add to cart, right? And then the variance here is to test whether if I put a buy now button, will that actually increase the purchase rate itself, right? And this is test against Android devices. It seems to show that in a mobile environment, people would prefer to just buy immediately one pieces, right? One item at a time. And this increases 19.88% of the purchase rate itself. Okay. Next is another experiment that was run to actually shows that on the product catalog page is whether to just show one photo. So the original version is just to show one product photo, but you have two variants here. Variant 1 actually uses the arrow to show that there is other product photos that you can click on, while the variant 2 actually use an ellipsis button here to show that there is other photos to show. Okay, so this also on an Android environment actually shows that if you have these few elements here, just an arrow and ellipsis, it encourages people to scroll more. And by scrolling and looking more at the product, they actually end up buying more. So it increased the purchase by at least 4% as well. Okay. Next is, this is a train, the train company in France. Basically, this app is here to actually share with you on a use case on whether it's beneficial to expand the proposed journey with the click to action button itself. Okay, so as a flag, what they did is that they flag on this first proposal element as a number. So if it actually says 0, that means it doesn't expand automatically. If the flag actually says 2, that means the first two proposals will expand, right? So if you have an expanded, automatically expand one of this proposal with the click to action button immediately showing, this actually can increase people's purchase rate and over 2% as well, right? So these are all on your mobile app environment, because on a mobile app, I think people like to do purchase quickly and want to see the click to button more quickly as well. Okay, so this is another experiment that was run to actually see the different positioning of your cross-selling. So during COVID period, naturally there's less travel. So there's the cancel and exchange button that people go onto the web app and then wants to exchange or cancel their ticket. But if we move down that button below the upsell itself, so upsell will be to rent a car, to book a hotel, for example. So on the second versions, they actually changed the location of the buttons. And it seems that from a company point, it's more beneficial to just try to upsell, and people actually click on the upsell more than just the cancel or exchange button. So it actually reduces people canceling and exchanging. So this is an interesting experiment to do to actually, increase your company's revenue as well. Right, so these are some examples. I think that's all that I have for today. Any questions you'd like to know more about A/B Tasty and the concept of testing and experimenting?
Okay, so thank you so much, Aileen, for that presentation. I think we are still digesting in our brain and